The late afternoon sun glinted off my Rolls Royce as I sat in my parents' driveway, staring at the house I'd grown up in. The once pristine Victorian mansion looked tired now. Paint peeling, gutters sagging, the carefully manicured lawn I remembered overgrown and patchy. It was a perfect metaphor for my family's fall from grace. My mother's desperate phone call yesterday had caught me off guard. 7 years of silence, broken by tears and pleas for help. The house was in foreclosure. They needed $400,000, and they had nowhere else to turn. "Please, Lily," she had sobbed. "I know we haven't been there for you, but we're your parents. We need you." My name is Lily Chen, and at 35, I was about to show my family exactly what their disappointment of a daughter had become. The last time I'd seen them, I was 28, and they were cutting me off completely, financially, emotionally, completely, because I'd refused to take over the family's failing import business. "You're throwing away everything we built for you," my father had shouted that day. "All our sacrifices, all our plans, worthless." What they didn't know was that I'd already been building something of my own. While they were pushing me to follow their path, I'd been quietly developing a revolutionary AI algorithm. The day they disowned me, I had already secured my first round of venture capital funding. Now, 7 years later, my tech company, Neural Dynamics, was worth billions. I kept my success quiet, staying out of the press, letting others be the public face of the company while I focused on innovation. My parents, caught up in their own drama, had never bothered to look into what had become of their disappointing daughter. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the car. The click of my Louboutins against the cracked concrete walkway seemed to echo in a quiet neighborhood. Before I could reach the door, it flew open. "Lily," my mother exclaimed, her eyes widening at my appearance. The daughter she'd last seen in jeans and a hoodie now stood before her in a tailored Channel suit, wearing jewelry that cost more than their mortgage. "Hello, Mother," I said calmly. "May I come in?" She stepped aside, flustering with her hands like she always did when nervous. Of course. Your father's in the living room. We weren't expecting you so early." I followed her through the foyer, noting how the once elegant house had fallen into disrepair. The antique furniture was dusty, the Persian rugs threadbare. The pride of the Chin family had clearly seen better days. My father sat in his favorite leather armchair, looking older and smaller than I remembered. His eyes narrowed as he took in my appearance. "You look expensive," he said, his tone a mix of confusion and suspicion. "Things have changed, Father," I replied, sitting down across from him. "But then that's why I'm here, isn't it? Things have changed for you too." My mother perched on the edge of the sofa, wringing her hands. "Lily, we're so grateful you came. We didn't know who else to turn to. The bank is foreclosing," I finished for her. "Yes, you mentioned that. Along with the fact that you need $400,000 to save the house. What I'd like to know is how you got here." My father's face darkened. "The business had some setbacks. The market changed, suppliers became unreliable. We had to take out loans to keep things afloat." I nodded slowly. "The import business I refused to take over. The one you said I was foolish to walk away from. That business." "Lily," my mother interrupted, clearly trying to prevent an argument. "Please, we know we hurt you. We said terrible things. But we're your parents and we need help." I studied them both, my proud father, now unable to meet my eyes, and my mother, still trying to manage everyone's emotions. They looked tired, defeated. Part of me wanted to tell them everything right then, about my success, my company, the fortune I'd built. But another part, the part that remembered years of criticism and control, wanted them to understand exactly what they'd thrown away. "Show me the paperwork," I said finally. "Everything, the loans, the business records, all of it. If I'm going to help, I need to know what I'm dealing with." My father started to protest, but my mother quickly gathered a stack of documents from a drawer. As I reviewed them, the full picture emerged. The business had been failing for years, long before they pressured me to take it over. They'd mortgaged the house multiple times, taken out high-interest loans, and now everything was coming due. "You're not just in trouble with the house," I said, looking up from the papers. "The business is completely underwater. You need a lot more than $400,000 to fix this. We just need to save the house," my mother said quickly. "The business, we can figure that out later." I set the papers down and leaned back, studying them. "Why did you really call me? After 7 years of silence, why now?" My father shifted uncomfortably. We heard rumors about your company. Someone mentioned you were doing well in tech. We thought, you thought I might have enough money to bail you out, I finished. But you didn't bother to actually find out what I've been doing all these years, did you? We were angry, my mother admitted softly. When you left, when you rejected everything we planned for you, it felt like betrayal. We were too proud to reach out to see what you'd made of yourself. I stood up, walking to the window. The garden where I'd spent countless hours as a child was overgrown now. The roses my mother had once tenderly cared for choked by weeds. Do you know what neural dynamics is? I asked, not turning around. Some sort of computer company, my father ventured. I couldn't help but laugh. Some sort of computer company. Yes, I suppose that's one way to put it. I turned to face them. Neural Dynamics is one of the fastest growing AI companies in the world. Our technology is revolutionizing everything from healthcare to climate science, and I founded it. The silence that followed was deafening. My parents stared at me, their expressions a mix of shock and disbelief. That's impossible, my father finally stammered. You never had that kind of business experience. I had something better. I cut in. I had vision. I saw where technology was going while you were clinging to an outdated business model. The daughter you dismissed as a disappointment built something worth billions. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Billions? Yes, I said simply. Which is why your request for $400,000 is actually quite modest. The question is, what are you really asking for? Money? Or something else? They looked at each other, decades of shared history passing between them in a glance. My father's shoulders slumped, and for the first time in my life, I saw tears in his eyes. We were wrong, he said, his voice rough with emotion. About everything. The business, your choices, you. We were so convinced we knew what was best that we couldn't see what you were capable of. I felt my own eyes stinging but kept my voice steady. And now that you know I have money, that I'm successful by any measure, is that why you want to reconnect? No, my mother cried. Lily, please. The money, yes, we need help. But seeing you today, realizing what you've achieved. We're proud of you. We should have been proud of you all along. I sat back down, letting my parents' words settle in the room. Pride. After 7 years of silence, after dismissing everything I'd worked for, they were proud. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice calm but firm. I'm going to help you, but not just with money. This is going to be about rebuilding everything, including our relationship, and it's going to happen on my terms. My father started to speak, but I held up my hand. Let me finish. First, I'm going to have my team do a complete audit of your finances. Everything. No secrets, no hidden debts. I need to know exactly what we're dealing with. Your team? My mother asked softly. Yes, mother. I have a team of financial advisors who manage my assets. They'll handle this professionally and discreetly. I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text to Sarah, my chief financial advisor. Within moments, she replied confirming she'd start the process immediately. Second, I continued, we're going to talk. Really talk. About everything that happened, everything that was said. No more sweeping things under the rug or pretending the past didn't happen. My parents exchanged nervous glances. The Chen family had never been good at emotional honesty. We were masters at avoiding difficult conversations, letting resentment build until it exploded. And third, I said, standing up, you're going to come see what I've built. Tomorrow, I'm taking you to Neural Dynamics. It's time you understood exactly what your daughter has achieved. The next morning, I picked them up in my Rolls Royce. My mother had made an effort to dress up, wearing one of her old designer suits that now hung loose on her frame. My father looked uncomfortable in a tie that had seen better days. As we drove through the city, heading toward the gleaming towers of the tech district, my mother kept glancing at me. What is it? I finally asked. You seem so different, she said. Confident, in control. I smiled slightly. I always was, mother. You just never saw it because it didn't fit your image of who I should be. We pulled into the private parking garage beneath the Neural Dynamics building, 40 stories of glass and steel that housed over 3,000 employees. As we stepped into the private elevator, my father's eyes widened at the fingerprint scanner. Security is tight, I explained. We develop proprietary technology here. What we're working on is worth billions. The elevator opened directly into my executive suite on the top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, and multiple screens displayed real-time data from our global operations. "This is impressive," my father said, turning slowly to take it all in. Sarah was waiting for us, tablet in hand. "Ms. Chen, I have the preliminary audit results." I nodded. "Thank you, Sarah. What's the damage?" She glanced at my parents before continuing. "Total outstanding debt is approximately $2.3 million, including the house mortgages, business loans, and various credit lines. Most of it is high interest and overdue." I heard my mother's sharp intake of breath. The number was clearly higher than they'd admitted, even to themselves. "Options?" I asked. "We can clear it all immediately if you want," Sarah replied. "Or set up a structured payment plan if you prefer to handle it that way." My father's face had gone pale. $2.3 million, he whispered. "Lily, we had no idea it had gotten so bad." "You didn't want to know," I corrected him. "Just like you didn't want to know what I was doing with my life." It was easier to look away. I turned to Sarah. "Set up a payment plan. I'll cover it all, but I want it structured properly, and I want the business officially closed. No more throwing good money after bad." After Sarah left, I led my parents into my private conference room. The walls were lined with awards and press coverage, articles about neural dynamics innovations, my patents, our company's impact on various industries. "This is what you walked away from," my mother said, reading one of the headlines, "when you refused to take over the family business." "No," I corrected her. "This is what I walked toward. You saw it as walking away because you couldn't imagine anything beyond what you had planned for me." I sat down at the conference table, gesturing for them to join me. "Do you know why I succeeded?" I asked. "Because when you cut me off, when you took away everything I was supposed to depend on, you accidentally gave me the greatest gift of all, freedom. Freedom to fail, to try, to build something without the weight of your expectations." My father's hands were trembling slightly as he clasped them on the table. "We thought we were doing what was best for you, protecting you. The family business, it was supposed to be your security. But it was never what I wanted," I said softly. "And you never asked. You just assumed your dreams should be my dreams. And look what your dreams built," my mother said, gesturing at the room around us. "While we were clinging to the past, you were creating the future." We spent the next few hours talking, really talking, for the first time in years. They told me about their struggles as the business declined, their fear of losing everything, their regret over pushing me away. I told them about the early days of neural dynamics, the risks I took, the nights I worked until dawn believing in my vision. "There's something else you should know," I said finally. "I'm not just successful, I'm wealthy beyond anything you could imagine. The company is worth billions, yes, but my personal net worth is over $47 million. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father seemed to age 10 years in an instant, the full weight of their rejection finally hitting him. All this time, he whispered, while we were drowning in debt, too proud to admit our mistakes. Too proud to reach out to your daughter, I finished for him. "Yes, but that's the past. What matters now is what we do going forward." I pulled out a folder and placed it on the table. "This is my proposal. I'll clear all your debts through a structured payment plan. The house will be put in a trust. You can live there for the rest of your lives, but it will eventually become a foundation to help young entrepreneurs. The family business will be closed properly, with all employees receiving generous severance packages." They nodded, understanding that this wasn't up for discussion. "But," I continued, "this isn't just about money. I want us to try being a real family, not the one you tried to force me to be part of, but something new, something honest. That means therapy, both individual and family sessions. It means regular dinners, real conversations, and genuine efforts to understand each other." "You don't owe us any of this," my mother said quietly. "After how we treated you." "No, I don't," I agreed. "But I'm not doing it out of obligation. I'm doing it because despite everything, you're my parents. And maybe it's time we all learn how to be a family without expectations or conditions." My father reached across the table and took my hand, the first time he touched me in 7 years. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Not for the money, but for giving us a chance to make things right." Over the next few months, we began the slow process of rebuilding. The family therapy sessions were difficult, Years of resentment and misunderstanding don't disappear overnight. But gradually, we started to understand each other better. My parents moved into their newly renovated house, now maintained by the trust I'd established. My mother started volunteering at a local youth center, mentoring young girls interested in technology. My father, free from the burden of the failing business, discovered a passion for teaching business classes at a community college. One evening, about 6 months after that first reunion, we sat in their garden. I'd had it restored to its former glory, the roses my mother loved blooming once again. "Do you remember," my mother said, sipping her tea, "how you used to sit out here with your laptop, working on what you called your projects? We thought you were just playing games, avoiding real work." I smiled. Those projects were the early versions of the AI algorithms that would eventually become neural dynamics core technology. "We were so blind," my father added, "so caught up in our own vision of success that we couldn't see you were already successful, just in a way we didn't understand." "The past is the past," I said, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. "What matters is that we're here now, learning to see each other clearly." My phone buzzed. A message from my team about a new breakthrough in our latest project. Looking at the message, then at my parents, I felt a sense of completion. I had succeeded not just in business, but in something far more challenging, forgiving, growing, and building a new kind of relationship with my family. "I have some exciting news," I said, putting my phone away. Neural Dynamics is launching a foundation to support young entrepreneurs from underprivileged backgrounds. We're calling it the Chen Innovation Fund. My parents' eyes widened. "You're using our name?" my father asked. "Yes," I replied, "because despite everything, you taught me something valuable, the importance of legacy, just not in the way you planned." My mother wiped away tears as my father squeezed her hand. We sat there in the garden, watching the day fade into night, three people who had lost their way finding a new path forward together. Sometimes the greatest success isn't measured in dollars or achievements, but in the ability to transform pain into purpose, resentment into reconciliation, and broken relationships into something stronger than before. As I drove home that night, I thought about the long journey that had brought us here. From the daughter they rejected to the successful businesswoman who could save them, from a family broken by pride to one slowly healing through honesty and effort. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Thank you for not giving up on us. We love you." I smiled, thinking how far we'd all come. Sometimes the hardest part of success isn't achieving it, it's learning how to share it with the people who once doubted you could succeed at all.
"Hey, sis!" Lila chirped, her voice bright with the kind of giddy confidence that usually meant she'd done something reckless. "So, I maxed out your credit cards. But don't worry, Mom and Dad said you'd understand. I just closed on my dream house. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I was standing in the middle of my one-bedroom apartment in Denver, still in my work heels, staring at my phone as credit alert after credit alert popped up. The total $48,000. All charged within 24 hours. You always play it so safe, Nora," she continued, breezy and oblivious. "And I've been working so hard on my influencer brand, you know I needed a space that reflects that. Something inspirational. Honestly, this place is perfect. Mom says it's about time I had something of my own." I sat down at my kitchen table, carefully closing my laptop before I crushed it with my hands. I took a breath, then another. "When's the housewarming?" I asked, my voice steady, even though my chest felt like it was cracking open. "This Saturday. You have to come. I mean, you basically bought it." She laughed, that same carefree laugh that had gotten her out of everything since we were kids. She hung up before I could respond. For a few minutes, I just sat there, letting the silence crawl over me. The window buzzed with city noise, but inside everything felt still. My hands were trembling, but not from panic. Not this time. This wasn't shock. This was clarity. I opened my laptop again, not to check the charges, not to cry. I opened a folder I'd labeled 6 months ago. Contingency. Lila. Inside, it camera footage flagged emails, notarized alerts. I'd been preparing for this moment even if I didn't want to admit it, even if I still hoped she might change. The phone buzzed again. This time it was Mom. "Nora, sweetheart, please don't be upset. Lila really needed this. Think of it as a gift." You'll be fine, you always are. I stared at the screen, then back at my files. Maybe they were right. I am fine, just not in the way they expect. I opened a blank page and started writing out a list, not of what I'd lost, but of what came next. It wasn't the first time Lila had taken something from me. The first big one was the college fund. I was 18 packing for campus when Mom sat me down with a brittle smile and said, "We had to help Lila with her boutique idea. She's passionate, Nora. You're so good with numbers, you'll find a way." I did. I picked up 2 jobs and lived off microwaved soup for 4 years. Then came the car, my first real one bought after 3 years of saving. Lila asked to borrow it for a weekend trip. 2 days later, it was totaled and my insurance dropped me. She was going through a breakup, Dad said, handing me bus money. Try to be compassionate. Always the same refrain, "You're strong, Nora. She needs more." I believed it longer than I should have. I let it slide because I wanted to be good, the dependable daughter, the steady one. And maybe some part of me hoped naively that one day they'd see how much it cost me. But hope started thinning out last fall. That's when I got a call from the bank, a flagged loan application in my name. I knew immediately who it was, and this time I didn't explain it away. I didn't confront her. I just started collecting. I bought cameras and placed them around my apartment desk drawer entryway computer station. I archived every suspicious email, saved every strange voicemail. And slowly, the truth stopped being something I felt it became something I could prove. So when Lila called about the house, I didn't panic. I didn't cry. I opened the folder and watched a video of her 3 weeks ago unlocking my front door with a key she swore she returned, flipping through my desk until she found my wallet. She held up my gold card like it was hers. I hit pause and stared at the still frame. Her smile was wide, triumphant, like the world belonged to her and I was just the supporting character keeping it funded. But not this time. This time I wasn't cleaning up behind her. I was moving in front of her, and I knew exactly where to start. I spent that night combing through my files. Every screenshot, every voicemail, every saved email from Mom with phrases like, "She's going through a lot and let's not make it harder for her." One message even hinted that I wouldn't notice a little help being taken. They always couched it in concern, like what they were doing was love. But love doesn't require stealing behind someone's back and calling it support. I archived it all, organized it by date source relevance, a digital timeline of betrayal. Then I opened Instagram. There was Lila twirling on hardwood floors in a video captioned, "Manifestation works if you believe hard enough the car dream house are blessed." In another post, she posed on the front steps with Mom and Dad, all matching pastel outfits, all teeth and filters. My name wasn't mentioned anywhere, neither were the credit cards that paid for it. That might have been the moment something hardened in me. The house. That particular house. I knew that address. I typed it into our internal system at Morris & Haley, the investment firm where I'd worked for nearly a decade. My name doesn't show up publicly anywhere on the development, but I helped design the financial model for the entire community. I know the property manager, I know the real estate broker, I know which permits haven't cleared and how many liens exist on neighboring parcels. Her house, the one she stole from my future, was already sitting on ground I'd helped vet. I stared at the property file for a long time, feeling that strange blend of fury and power rise in my chest. They thought they'd pulled something over on me. But they built their dream house on a foundation I helped pour, and they were about to find out what happens when the quiet one finally decides to stop staying quiet. By Tuesday, Lila had posted a kitchen reveal video featuring white marble counters and gold fixtures tagging half a dozen interior brands. The caption read, "Can't believe this is real life. Proof that if you leap, the universe catches you." The universe apparently had my credit limit. In another post, she posed in a silk robe with a coffee mug writing "Morning Light in my forever home. Hits different." It hit me differently too, like a punch in the ribs. Meanwhile, Mom and Dad had gone from evasive to pushy. "We just need you to sign the refinancing paperwork," Dad said over the phone. "It's a technicality. You're already on the credit lines anyway, so this would just make things cleaner." "You always make things smoother," Nora Mom added. And Lila's under so much pressure right now with all the attention. Can't you just support her quietly for once? I smiled, even though they couldn't see it. Of course. I'll bring everything to the housewarming party. Oh, good, Mom sighed. We'll have the papers printed. You can sign them there. They had no idea what I was actually bringing. On Wednesday, I met with a real estate attorney. On Thursday, with compliance at my firm to clarify legal ties to the development. By Friday, I had notarized documentation security footage stills printed in color and a signed statement from the property manager confirming the buyer's name and funding source. I slid everything into a thick manila envelope and placed it carefully in my work bag. Let them decorate their lies. Let them sip sparkling wine and toast to false triumphs. I'd be there on time, polite and smiling. But I wasn't showing up to celebrate. I was showing up to collect. The driveway was lined with SUVs and imported sedans. Someone handed me a mimosa before I even reached the front door. The house smelled like new paint and expensive candles, the kind that tried too hard to suggest peace. Nora Lila squealed, rushing over in a silk wrap dress that probably cost more than my rent. You came. You have to see the upstairs bathroom. It's like spa vibes. She pulled me into a hug like nothing had happened, like she hadn't broken into my apartment and drained every card I owned. I smiled and hugged her back. I brought you a housewarming gift, I said softly. Her eyes lit up. You didn't have to. I mean, technically, you already did, she giggled. I raised my voice just enough. Actually, I think this is something the whole family should see. A few heads turned. I turned toward my parents standing near the dining room sipping champagne. Mom, Dad. You too. They exchanged a glance. They recognized my tone. The one I used the day I discovered Lila took my college fund. It was the voice I used when I stopped asking and started acting. A hush settled as the room filled in around us, party chatter fading to murmurs. I pulled the manila envelope from my bag and set it on the marble kitchen island. Lila, I said calmly. Since you believe in sharing blessings, I thought I'd share something too. One by one, I pulled out the printed still security footage of her in my apartment, her hand on my wallet. Copies of my credit card statements showing the charges. Screenshots of her Instagram posts time-stamped and notarized. Emails from my parents suggesting I should be flexible with my financials. My mother clutched her glass like it might shield her. My father opened his mouth, then shut it again. And finally I said, laying down the last page, a legal breakdown of what you're looking at: credit card fraud, identity theft, and breaking and entering. Plus, aiding and abetting. Lila stared at the papers like they were in a different language. The color drained from her face. You're joking, she whispered. I met her eyes. No, I'm finally serious. Around us, the guests stood frozen. No one reached for a refill. No one laughed. I told you I brought a gift, I said. Now it's time to open it. And then I reached into my bag again, and this time I pulled out the real decision. I placed the second stack of papers on the counter, neat and heavy. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. You have two options, I said. Option 1, you sign over the deed and agree to a repayment plan in writing notarized. Every dollar you stole comes back with interest. Option 2, I hand everything over to the police, including the video, the emails, and the forged signature from last year's car lease. Lila's mouth parted, but nothing came out. Her eyes darted toward Mom, then Dad, then the papers. This is insane, she finally breathed. We're family. That's exactly why it's gone this far, I said. Because no one ever tells you no. I was going to pay you back, she whined, her voice already fraying. Once my content starts picking up again? No, I cut in. You were going to wait for me to forget, like I always do. Dad stepped forward. Nora, come on. Jail time over some money. It's not just money, I said. It's everything. The entitlement, the lies, the fact that you stood by while she robbed me and then asked me to sign more away. Mom sniffled. We didn't mean harm. We just wanted both our girls to be okay. You wanted her to succeed at my expense, I replied, and you expected me to absorb it quietly like always. Lila's hands shook as she hovered over the document. You'd really do this to me, she whispered. To your own sister. You already did this to me, I said, calm as stone, and no one stopped you. I watched her face shift. Anger, shame, confusion, then fear. Real fear. She turned to our parents, pleading with her eyes, but they said nothing. For the first time in my life, they had no script. I pushed the pen toward her. You choose Lila. This isn't revenge. It's boundaries. Her fingers curled slowly around the pen, and for the first time in years, she looked unsure of what came next. I let her sit with that uncertainty, 'cause that's where growth begins. Lila showed up to the signing 15 minutes late, flanked by our parents like they were storming a courtroom. Her usual glam was dialed down, muted colors, no lashes, just enough to play the part of the misunderstood sister. But her eyes still had that old spark, the one that always meant she thought she had an angle. I have something to add, she said, pulling out a folder and sliding it across the table toward my attorney Diana. Before we go any further. Diana opened it without flinching. Inside was a photocopy of a contract dated 6 years ago, bearing my signature, apparently co-signing any future business debt Lila took on. Nora agreed to support my ventures, Lila said. That includes financial backing. This house falls under that umbrella. My parents nodded like they were in a rehearsal. Dad even folded his arms with a smug little smile. I picked up the page, studied the signature, then looked at Diana. Show them, I said. Diana turned her laptop toward the table. On screen, grainy footage from my old apartment. Lila at my desk holding a printout, pausing, then slowly tracing my signature over and over until it matched. She practiced it 8 times. I've known about this for years, I said, keeping my voice level. I kept the footage. I kept everything. Lila's mouth opened. Nothing came out. You forged my name, I continued. That document means nothing, and now that you've tried to use it to manipulate legal proceedings, it's evidence of attempted fraud. Diana slid the real transfer papers forward again. Shall we continue with the original agreement, or are we taking this to court? For the first time, Lila looked genuinely small. The room felt heavier now, no smugness, no backup plan. Just consequences. She didn't touch the pen. Not yet. I leaned back in my chair, hands folded. I could wait. I had waited for years, but this time I wasn't the one squirming. The silence stretched too long, broken only by the ticking of the clock on Diana's wall. Lila stared at the papers like they were written in another language. Her hands hovered uncertain, waiting for someone to save her like they always did. Dad cleared his throat louder than necessary. Sign it. Lila blinked at him. What you heard me, he said, voice low and flat. Sign the papers, Lila. This is done. Her face crumpled for a second, not in tears, just disbelief. Like the one person who'd always bent the rules for her had finally stepped outside the game. Mom leaned forward, her voice soft and trembling. Nora, she didn't mean it this way. She gets caught up in things. You know how she is. I do, I said, not unkindly. And that's exactly why I'm doing this. But she's your sister. And I'm your daughter, I said. That never seemed to matter when I was the one cleaning up the mess. Lila lowered her head. Her fingers picked at the edge of the folder, still not moving toward the pen. I didn't say another word. I wasn't going to beg for closure she didn't deserve. Dad walked over, picked up the pen, and dropped it in front of her. Enough, he said, like he was talking to a child who'd finally pushed too far. Lila's signature was messy, almost angry, but it was real. No practiced lines, no fake flourishes. Just her name exposed and vulnerable for once. Diana notarized the documents. I watched as each page became official, binding, irreversible. Mom wiped at her eyes, but no one reached for her hand. Dad stood with his arms crossed, looking at the floor. I gathered the papers, carefully folded them into a new envelope, and stood up. No dramatic words, no parting shots. Just the weight of finality settling into the room. As I walked out, no one followed. No one called after me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for leaving them behind. It's been a year since the signing. A full year since I walked out of that office with a folder in my bag, and the weight of my family's expectations finally lifted off my shoulders. Lila never went to jail. I didn't press charges. She signed everything stuck to the repayment plan and surprisingly held up her end. Every month, like clockwork, a payment arrives. No late fees, no excuses, just a quiet transfer from her account to mine. She has a job now, a real one, marketing associate at a small local firm. Not glamorous, but solid. Her Instagram looks different too. Gone are the luxury shots and faux deep quotes. Now, it's photos of coffee mugs beside spreadsheets, captions like, "Budgeting is self-respect" and "Financial literacy is healing." Sometimes I scroll through them and wonder if any of it is real, but then I remember at least now she's pretending in the right direction. Dad called a few months ago. He didn't try to justify anything, just said he was sorry, that he'd started seeing a therapist, that maybe they failed both of us in different ways. It wasn't everything, but it was something. Mom didn't call, but she left a voicemail last week. She sounded tired, not from anger, but from understanding. "You were right, Nora. She needed to fall," she said. "We never let her. That's on us." I saved the message. I haven't replied yet. Some days I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed quiet again, if I'd signed those papers, if I'd swallowed it all just to keep the peace. But then I see the changes, not perfect, not fast, but real, and I know that silence would have cost all of us more than we could afford. I open the banking app on my phone. The most recent deposit is there. Lila's note attached paid early this month. Thank you. I type a simple reply, received, take care, and close the screen. It's not forgiveness, but it's enough to keep walking forward. The house sold in the spring, just before the tulips came in. A young couple with 2 kids bought it, first-time homeowners, eager and wide-eyed. I left the welcome packet on the counter with a handwritten note. May this home hold more honesty than mine ever did. The profit covered my remaining balances and the legal fees. I didn't keep the rest. I put it toward a down payment on a small condo downtown, just enough space for me, sunlight in the morning, and quiet at night. No cameras. No locks on desk drawers. No folder titled Contingency. I didn't need a backup plan anymore. I wasn't waiting for someone to betray me. The promotion came through last quarter VP of Strategic Finance. My boss cited how I handled complex internal conflict with integrity and clarity. I almost laughed. I didn't tell him the conflict wore my last name. Lila still texts once a month with her payment receipts. This time it came early. Her message was short. Payment sent. Early this time. No emojis, no excuses. I typed back, thank you. That's our rhythm now. Professional, distant, clean. Mom and Dad invite me to dinner sometimes. I go. We talk about the weather and books and what therapy is teaching them. We don't talk about the house, or the signature, or the silence that lasted for decades. But I sleep well. Not because everything is perfect, but because for once, it's real. I had just kicked off my shoes and shrugged off the tailored blazer that still smelled like stress and recycled conference room air when I heard it a knock. Not hesitant, not timid, firm, measured, like someone who had every right to be here. I paused halfway through, unzipping my laptop bag, heart tightening as I stepped toward the door. My building had a security system. No one just showed up. But when I looked through the peephole, the air in my lungs froze. It was Joelle. Behind her arms crossed like a sentry stood Vernon. My mother looked older, but in that carefully preserved way, lipstick too bright for midday earrings too big for the occasion. Vernon hadn't changed much. Same rigid posture, same expression that made it seem like warmth had been surgically removed from his face. I opened the door but didn't move aside. Marin Joelle said, her voice breezy like we'd just talked last week. "Can we come in?" "We need to talk." Before I could answer, Vernon stepped forward and crossed the threshold without waiting. Joelle followed with a brief, awkward smile. I closed the door behind them slower than necessary. I didn't offer them the couch. I didn't ask how they'd been. I stood still, watching, feeling the pressure in my chest rising like steam trapped in a sealed pot. Vernon got to the point. Of course he did. "We heard about your new role, Director of Strategic Systems, right big deal. Sounds like you're doing well." I nodded once, carefully, neutral. He continued, "Cleo and Asa are starting college this fall. Expenses are stacking up. We figured with how well you're doing, you might be in a position to help." It didn't hit all at once. First came disbelief, then something sharper recognition. They weren't here for reconciliation. They weren't here to acknowledge the years of silence, the empty birthdays, the loan I asked for at 18 that they pretended never arrived. They were here because I was finally worth something. Joelle chimed in like she was sweetening the ask. "They've worked hard, Marin, just like you did. And you know how tight things are for everyone right now?" I said nothing. My jaw ached from clenching. My eyes drifted to Vernon, who was already scanning the apartment like he was cataloging the things I owned. A successful life in his mind was a bank account waiting to be tapped. What shocked me most wasn't their gall, it was how utterly unsurprised I was. It was the way my body remembered to brace itself before my mind had even caught up. I stepped back toward the door but didn't open it. My hand found the knob again. I gripped it tightly, grounding myself in something real, something solid. My other hand trembled slightly, barely noticeable. They didn't see it. They never did. I didn't ask them to leave, but I also didn't offer them a seat. Before the silence, before the forgetting, there were nights when my mother and I lived in a rhythm all our own. We shared a small apartment above Nana Ruth's garage on Sycamore Street, just the two of us. The walls were thin, the floors creaked, and the heater groaned louder than the wind in winter, but it felt like home. My mother worked long shifts as a physical therapy assistant while going to school part-time, and I learned early how to reheat leftover rice and tie my shoes without asking. Still, every night, no matter how tired she was, she came home to me. Sometimes we'd eat microwave dinners cross-legged on the couch, watching reruns through static. Other nights she'd read aloud from worn paperbacks, her voice slurring just a bit on the longer words. I'd pretend not to notice how her eyes fluttered from exhaustion before the end of the chapter. I'd nudge her shoulder and say, "Keep going," and she always tried. Back then, love didn't need words. It was a warm towel after a bath, a forehead kiss between bites, her hand reaching behind her without looking just to make sure I was still there. When Vernon entered the picture, it didn't feel like a disruption, not at first. He was soft-spoken and polite, brought flowers from the grocery store, and smiled with his mouth more than his eyes. I was 9 when they met, 11 when they married. He moved into our little space above the garage for a few months before they got a mortgage, and we left Nana Ruth's warmth behind. At first, I was curious. He didn't talk to me much, but he didn't yell either. He existed beside me like furniture solid present easy to ignore. But slowly the tone in our home shifted. The apartment got quieter in strange ways. Dinner became something we did quickly and without conversation. No more sitting on the couch. No more books read aloud. The routines we'd built were replaced by new ones that didn't include me. He'd talk about work politics, something he saw on TV, and Joelle Mom would nod, laugh, ask follow-up questions. When I tried to chime in, my words floated out unanswered, like they'd been absorbed into the walls. I told myself it was nothing, just grown-up stuff, just stress, just change. But then it was my math test left unsigned. Then it was her missing my science fair. Then it was the night she forgot to say goodnight at all. One night I said, "Do you remember when we used to read?" She looked at me like I'd asked about a dream she only half remembered. I still stayed close, still hovered waiting for her to look back and see me. But she never did. And the day she told me she was pregnant with twins, she smiled like it was the best news in the world. When Joelle told me she was pregnant, I smiled so hard my cheeks hurt. "Twins," she said, laughing nervously, one hand on her barely there belly. Can you believe it? I could. And I wanted to believe it meant something good. I pictured helping her fold tiny clothes, reading picture books on the floor, showing them how to spell their names and tie their shoes. I thought maybe, just maybe, it would bring us closer again. That I could be part of this new version of our family. I started babysitting for neighbors, saving my small earnings in a plastic envelope labeled Baby Fund. I made a list of names I liked and imagined them calling me Big Sis. I practiced warming bottles with Nana Ruth during weekends just to be ready. But as Joelle's belly grew, so did the space between us. She stopped asking me about school. Our movie nights vanished. When I handed her a quiz I got an A on, she glanced at it, mumbled good job, and walked away. One afternoon, I came home to find my bedroom rearranged, half my shelves cleared to make room for boxes of baby clothes. No one had asked. At dinner, it was all about Vernon's job and her cravings and the nursery paint colors. I became part of the furniture again, only now I knew it. I sat smaller, spoke less, waited longer to be noticed. When my 13th birthday came around, I waited all day. No cake, no card, no mention. Just a regular Wednesday with dishes to rinse and homework to finish. I told myself maybe she was planning a surprise. That night, I climbed into bed and stared at the ceiling, hands folded tight to keep from shaking. The tears came anyway, quiet ones, the kind you learn to cry when you don't want anyone to hear. She remembered the next morning. Nana Ruth had called to remind her. Joelle gave me a card from the dollar store with an apologetic kiss on the head. "Sorry, honey. I've just been so tired." I nodded. Said it was fine. After that, I stopped expecting things. Vernon started correcting me more. "Don't talk with your mouth full. You're too old for that tone. Why aren't you helping more?" But he never asked how I was. Never noticed when I shrank further into myself. Joelle was always somewhere else, even when she was in the room. And when the twins were born, the shift was complete. There were feedings and diapers and milestones. There were photo frames that only held their faces. There were cooing visitors and baby showers and endless bottles lined up on the counter. There was no space left for me. And it hit me one night watching Joelle rock one of the babies to sleep, humming softly, her face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years. She hadn't just become a mother again. She had become a new one. It happened on a Thursday. Dinner was baked chicken and instant mashed potatoes, the kind Joelle made when she was too tired to pretend. The twins were fussy. Vernon was irritable, and I was trying to stay invisible, clearing plates before anyone asked, scraping food into the trash, quietly stacking dishes without clatter. I thought I'd done everything right. After the twins were down, Joelle called me into the living room. Vernon sat on the edge of the couch, his hands folded like he was about to deliver a sermon. Joelle didn't sit. She stood behind him, arms crossed over her chest, eyes fixed on a spot somewhere near the carpet. Marin Vernon began not unkind but detached, like he was talking to a tenant instead of a child. "Things are tight. The babies need more room, more time, more of Joelle's attention. We've been trying to make it all work, but it's getting harder." I stood in the doorway, still holding a dish towel, my fingers clenched around the damp fabric. He continued, "We think it's best if you stay with your grandmother for a while, just until things settle down." Joelle still hadn't looked at me. The towel in my hand was soaked now, dripping onto the hardwood. I couldn't feel my legs. "Just until I get on my feet," I asked, though I wasn't sure who I was asking. Vernon gave a tight nod. Joelle just nodded. No protest, no hesitation. That was the worst part. I went to my room and packed slowly, like if I moved gently enough, none of it would be real. A few shirts, my school books, a framed photo of me and Nana Ruth at the county fair, both of us laughing sticky with cotton candy. I left the rest posters, the notebook under my mattress, the paper star I'd made for Joelle one Christmas, and found weeks later shoved in a drawer. The hallway felt longer than usual when I stepped out. Vernon said nothing. Joelle stood near the doorway but didn't hug me, didn't ask if I had enough socks or if I wanted her to walk me there. She opened the door and let the cold air spill in. I walked the few blocks to Nana Ruth's with my backpack pulling on one shoulder and the night pressing down on the other. I didn't cry. Not yet. She opened the door before I even knocked. I must have been visible from the window, a small figure in a too-light jacket. "Oh, baby," she whispered, pulling me in, wrapping her arms around me like she could stitch something broken back together just by holding it tight enough. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't have to. Behind her, my Aunt Simone stood in the hallway with a blanket in her arms and a look that said she'd known this was coming all along. The first thing I learned living with Nana Ruth was that love could be quiet and consistent. The second thing I learned was that love didn't pay for school supplies or bus fare. They gave me everything they could, a spare room with mismatched furniture, warm meals, space to breathe, but they were retired, living on fixed incomes, and I could see the way Nana's hands trembled whenever the mail brought bills. So I got a job at the Sunrise Diner a few blocks from school. Weekends, evenings, school breaks, whenever I wasn't in class, I was in an apron, refilling coffee-clearing sticky syrup off laminated menus, counting crumpled dollar bills at the end of the shift, and walking home with my feet aching through thin sneakers. I didn't complain. I didn't tell anyone. Not my teachers. Not the other kids. I smiled when I had to raise my hand when I could, and kept my grades steady because I knew that was the only way out. Simone used to leave little notes in my lunchbox. Keep climbing or I see you. Sometimes I kept them in my pocket through a shift like armor. Senior year came faster than I expected. I applied to 5 colleges, half of them on a whim, just to see if someone out there might see something in me. When the first acceptance letter came, I opened it in the back room of the diner on my break. I didn't scream. I didn't even smile at first. I just stared at the words until they made sense. We are pleased to offer you admission. Then came the math. Even with a partial scholarship and a Pell Grant, it wasn't enough. I needed a federal loan, which meant I needed a co-signer. I sat at Nana's kitchen table drafting the message to Joelle, wrote it, deleted it, wrote it again. Finally, I hit send, "Hi, Mom. I got into a few schools. I'm working on financial aid, but I need a co-signer for a loan." "Would you be willing?" she replied the next morning. "Sorry, we're saving for Cleo and Asa. Hope you understand." That was it. No congratulations, no questions. Just a flat rejection like she was turning down a telemarketing offer. I stared at the screen until the words stopped hurting. When I told Simone, she didn't flinch. She just nodded like she'd expected it. "Okay," she said. "Then I'll do it." I blinked. "You don't have to. I know I don't," she said. "But I'm going to." She signed the papers the next day, no questions asked, no guilt attached. Just a signature that said, "I believe in you." And that was enough to carry me through the next 4 years. College wasn't glamorous. It wasn't late-night parties or campus clubs or dorm rooms strung with fairy lights. For me, it was instant noodles, discount coffee, and the hum of a second-hand laptop as I taught myself how to build websites from YouTube videos and free tutorials. During the day, I sat through lectures and took meticulous notes. At night, I worked remotely for a small florist chain, fixing broken code and managing their online orders. I learned to live on 3 hours of sleep and carry eye drops in my bag. Some days I thought I might disappear entirely from exhaustion, but then I'd open my inbox and see a message from Simone. Just a heart, just a sunflower, just something that reminded me I wasn't doing this alone. I never posted about it, didn't talk about it with anyone but her. I didn't want congratulations. I wanted stability, a life I could build with my own hands, brick by silent brick. When graduation came, Simone was there in the front row, wearing a blue dress that didn't quite fit eyes red before I even reached the stage. I looked for Joelle once, just once, but I knew better. Her absence was the only consistent thing she'd given me. Simone took a photo of me holding my degree in one hand and a half-eaten granola bar in the other. "Proof," she said, grinning. "You did it." After that, the years blurred. I moved to Asheville, took a job in logistics, moved up quietly, slowly, taught myself new systems, built a modest life in a quiet apartment with a porch full of potted herbs and peace I didn't dare name out loud. Sometimes I scrolled through old photos of the twins on Joelle's page, birthday cakes, school awards, family vacations to places I'd never been invited. I stopped one day without really deciding to. Just closed the tab, blocked the account, not out of anger, just preservation. My world became calm, steady, mine. Until last fall at a cousin's baby shower, Simone made a comment in passing. Something about a project I was leading. How proud she was, how far I'd come. I don't think she even noticed who was standing behind her plate of fruit and hand plastic fork, paused midair. Joelle. She didn't say anything right away, just blinked, tilted her head, and for the first time in over a decade, her eyes followed me across a room like I was someone worth noticing. 3 days later, they showed up at my door. They stood in my living room like they still had a place in it. Joelle's smile flickered the moment I didn't mirror it. Vernon's arms were crossed, his stance casual but heavy with expectation. "We heard about your new role," Joelle said again, as if I hadn't already heard her say it on the porch. "It's amazing, Marin. You've come so far." I said nothing, let her fill the silence. Vernon jumped in. "The twins are both starting school this fall, good schools. but tuition's a stretch and we figured, you're in a good position now. You could help? Help. Like it was an obligation. Like I owed them something for surviving without them. Joelle's tone softened syrupy. We know it's a big ask. But you're doing well, and it's what families do, support each other when they can. I looked at her, then really looked. And I saw the years that had passed, not just on her face, but in the gap between who she once was and who she chose to become. You weren't there when I needed you, I said, voice steady. You didn't sign the loan. You didn't show up to graduation. You didn't call, not once. Joelle's jaw tightened. You're being dramatic. No, I said. I'm being clear. I made it without you. And now you want to act like we're still a family? Vernon scoffed. You don't have kids? You're not married? What else are you spending money on? I turned to him. Peace. Therapy. Rent I earned without guilt attached. Joelle's eyes sharpened. This is selfish. I breathed in slowly, letting it settle in my chest before I answered. No, I said. This is healed. The room felt still, not tense, just finished. I walked to the door, opened it, and held it without saying a word. They stood frozen for a beat, then Joelle stepped forward, brushing past me. Vernon followed, mumbling something I didn't catch. I didn't slam the door, just closed it firmly. And then I stood there, hand on the knob, steady in a way I never knew I could be. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and a blank email draft waiting. No rage, no essays, just one final boundary written in words that didn't tremble. Joelle, I wish you and your family well, but I am not in a position emotionally or otherwise to support your request. Please do not contact me again. Marin, I read it once, then again, then pressed send without hesitation. There were no posts, no rants, no cryptic quotes online, just stillness, a silence that belonged to me this time. That afternoon, I logged into the donation portal for my old community college. Under purpose, I typed scholarship fund for first-generation students without a co-signer. I listed it in Ruth Ellery's name. She'd never used a computer in her life, but I think she'd have liked that. The confirmation pinged in my inbox, and I let myself exhale. A long, quiet breath I hadn't known I was holding since I was 15. Later, I stepped onto the porch and crouched beside the lavender plant Simone had given me when I moved here. The soil was dry, the stems leaning slightly toward the sun. I watered it gently, watching the earth darken and settle. Nothing about my life had come easy, but some things had finally learned to bloom, and this time I wasn't waiting for anyone else to notice.